I didn't notice the moment I stopped expecting more from my life. That's the part that still bothers me. It didn't happen after a failure or a breakup or some dramatic loss. It happened quietly between two normal days. I was sitting in my car, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, just staring at the dashboard. I wasn't tired. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I just didn't feel urgency anymore. And at the time, I thought that meant I was finally stable. People talk about burnout like it's loud, like it announces itself. For me, it felt like calm, a calm that didn't ask questions. My life looked fine from the outside. Good job, consistent routine, no real chaos, the kind of life people describe as settled. But something inside me had gone quiet in a way that didn't feel earned. I used to measure time in goals, next promotion, next move, next version of myself. Now I measured it in habits, gym, work, dinner, sleep, repeat. The strange thing is, I didn't miss anyone. Not at first. I told myself that meant I'd matured past attachment, past need, past emotional dependency. That story worked until it didn't. Her name was Claire. I hadn't thought about her in months. Not deliberately. She existed somewhere behind everything else, like an old song you don't play, but still know the words to. We didn't end badly. That's what made it harder to understand why she kept resurfacing in my mind. No explosion, no betrayal, just two people who slowly stopped reaching. I told myself it was mutual. Later, I realized silence always favors the person who's already detached. The night she came back into my awareness wasn't special. No dream, no message. I was standing in line at a grocery store, watching the conveyor belt move too slowly, when I caught myself thinking she would have laughed at this. And suddenly, she was there. Fully. I remembered how she noticed small things, the way people spoke when they were nervous, the way I avoided certain questions. She used to say I was selectively honest. At the time, I took that as a compliment. I hadn't spoken to her since the day we decided not to try anymore. Not a fight, a discussion. Two adults explaining themselves calmly. The kind of ending that looks healthy but leaves no room for emotion to land. You're always preparing for a future that keeps moving, she'd said. And you're always trying to slow things that don't need to stop, I replied. We both believed we were right. That's usually how it ends. What I didn't realize then was that she wasn't asking me to slow down. She was asking me to arrive. Weeks passed, then more. The thought of her didn't fade. It changed shape, less nostalgia, more discomfort. I started noticing how little I talked about myself, not surface-level stuff, real things. I answered questions efficiently. I avoided anything that required reflection. I'd trained myself to sound composed. Men get rewarded for that. One night, a coworker asked me if I was happy. Not in a deep way, just casually. I said yes without hesitation, and immediately felt like I'd lied to someone who didn't deserve it. That question stayed with me longer than it should have. I replayed it during workouts, in the shower, while lying awake at night, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I knew it wasn't simple. I wasn't unhappy, I was untouched. By risk, by connection, by anything that might disrupt the balance I'd built. I realized something uncomfortable. I hadn't chosen peace, I'd chosen predictability, and I'd mistaken it for growth. A few days later, I found an old notebook, one I'd used years ago when I still believed writing things down would clarify them. Most of the pages were half-filled, plans I didn't finish, thoughts I didn't follow, but one sentence was underlined twice. If I stop wanting more, will that mean I'm finally okay, or just done? I don't remember writing it, but it felt like it had been waiting for me. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened my phone, typed her name, stared at it. I didn't send anything. Not yet. Because part of me still believed restraint was strength, and part of me was afraid of what would happen if it wasn't. I went to sleep knowing something had shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough to make me understand that the life I'd built was stable, and that stability had started to feel like a ceiling. And the next morning, I woke up knowing the morning after I found the notebook, nothing felt different. That was the unsettling part. No rush of clarity, no sudden courage, just the same routine, now louder in my head. I went through the motions on autopilot. Shower, coffee, traffic, but something kept pulling at me, like a low-grade signal I couldn't turn off. Not urgency, awareness. At work, I caught myself watching people more closely, noticing who leaned forward when they spoke, who avoided eye contact, who filled silence just to escape it. I recognized the pattern. I'd been one of them. Claire used to say silence was my favorite defense. I thought she meant during conflict. I realized she meant always. Around noon, I checked my phone. Her name was still there in the search bar from the night before. I hadn't erased it. That felt intentional. I didn't message her. Instead, I asked myself a question I'd avoided for years. What exactly am I protecting? My time, my focus, my independence, or just my image of being someone who doesn't need anyone? I'd built my identity around being composed, reliable, self-contained. Men like me don't unravel publicly. We internalize, we manage, we wait for feelings to pass. But these weren't passing. They were accumulating. That evening, I went for a walk instead of the gym. No headphones, no podcast filling the space, just my thoughts unfiltered. It was uncomfortable in a way I'd forgotten. I replayed our last conversation, not the words, the tone, how careful we were, how respectful. Two people trying not to hurt each other by refusing to say the things that might. She'd asked me once, months before we ended it, do you ever feel like you're living slightly ahead of yourself? I'd laughed, said something clever, avoided answering. Back then, I believed emotional restraint was maturity. Now I wondered if it was just fear with better vocabulary. I stopped at a bar I'd never been to, not because I wanted a drink, because I didn't want to go home yet. The place was quiet, dim lights, soft music, no one trying to be impressive. I sat at the counter and ordered something simple. A guy a few seats down was arguing quietly with his phone. Someone on the other end. His voice wasn't angry, just tired. I caught fragments. I'm not saying I don't care. I just don't know how to show it the way you want. That line hit harder than it should have. I finished my drink slower than necessary, paid, left. The night air felt sharper now, more real. When I got home, I didn't turn on the TV. I sat on the couch and let the quiet exist. And that's when the memory came back fully. The night Claire told me she felt alone even when we were together. Not lonely. Alone. There's a difference. She hadn't accused me. She'd said it calmly. Like an observation, she was still trying to understand herself. I'd responded with logic, schedules, stress, timing, everything except presence. I told myself then that she was asking for too much. Now I wondered if she'd simply been asking for access. I opened my phone again. This time, I typed a message. Not long, not dramatic, just honest. I don't know if this is welcome, but I've been thinking about something you said a long time ago, and I think I finally understand it. I stared at it, read it 3 times, deleted it. Not because it wasn't true, because it was incomplete. I realized something important. If I reached out now, it wouldn't be to reconnect. It would be to relieve my discomfort, to ease my own tension. And that wasn't fair to her. I needed to know something first, whether I was willing to be different, not just reflective. Over the next week, I started noticing how often I defaulted to distance, how quickly I changed subjects, how rarely I admitted uncertainty. It wasn't accidental, it was practiced. I tested small things, letting silence linger, answering questions without polishing them, saying I don't know and not following it with a joke. It felt exposed, like standing without armor, but nothing collapsed. The world didn't punish me, people leaned in. One night, a friend told me something personal. Normally, I'd respond with advice. Instead, I just listened. He thanked me afterward for not fixing it. That unsettled me more than it should have. I began to understand what Claire had seen. I wasn't unavailable because I didn't care. I was unavailable because caring required presence, and presence meant risk. 2 weeks later, I ran into her name again, this time in an unexpected place. A mutual friend mentioned she was thinking of moving again. Somewhere warmer, somewhere slower. That did something to me. Not panic, clarity. If I spoke now, it had to be because I was ready to arrive, not because I missed her. Those are different motivations. One asks for connection, the other asks for comfort. That night, I rewrote the message. Shorter, cleaner, more grounded. I don't expect anything from this, but I wanted you to know I finally see the part of myself you were reacting to, and I'm working on it. I didn't send it yet, but this time, I didn't delete it either. I went to bed knowing the next step wasn't about her. It was about whether I could stop hiding behind control long enough to be real. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what that message that night. Not because I hesitated, because I wanted to be sure it wasn't the only honest thing I could do. The next morning felt lighter, not hopeful, just less crowded inside my head, like I'd cleared a room and hadn't decided yet what to put back in it. I started noticing how often I'd been living in reaction, avoiding discomfort, postponing conversations, waiting for emotions to pass instead of understanding them. I'd called that patience. It was delay. Over the next few days, nothing dramatic happened. No sudden breakthroughs, no confessions, just repetition and awareness. I caught myself before shutting down, before defaulting to neutrality, before turning feelings into abstractions. Sometimes I still did it, but now I noticed, and that mattered. On Thursday evening, I ran into her unexpectedly, not in some cinematic way, at a grocery store, a quiet aisle, frozen food. We noticed each other at the same time, that brief pause where both people decide how much of themselves to reveal. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I answered. It felt even, not loaded. That surprised me. We talked casually. Weather, work, small updates. She seemed calm, grounded, different. So did I. There was space between us, not distance, space. "I heard you might be moving," I said. She nodded. "Thinking about it. Anywhere specific?" "Not yet. Somewhere I don't have to rush so much." She smiled when she said it. Not bitter, clear. I felt the old instinct rise. The urge to explain myself, to show her I'd changed, to justify. I didn't follow it. Instead, I said something simpler. "I think you were right about me, back then." She looked at me more carefully now. "I didn't know how to stay present," I continued. "I thought being steady meant staying controlled." I paused, and I think that made me feel safer than it made you feel close. She didn't interrupt, didn't nod too quickly, just listened. "That sounds like you," she said finally. "Not as an accusation, as recognition. I'm working on it," I added, not as a promise, as a statement. She studied my face for a moment. "Good," she said. "I'm glad." There it was. No grand moment, no tearful reunion, no regret speech, just acknowledgement. We stood there a little longer. Two people who had once wanted different versions of the same future. "I should go," she said. "Yeah," I replied. As she turned away, she stopped. "By the way," she said, "you weren't wrong about everything." I waited. "You just weren't ready yet." Then she left. No dramatic exit, just another person merging back into her life. I stood there longer than necessary, letting the moment land, not chasing it, not reframing it, just letting it be what it was. Later that night, I thought about the message still unsent on my phone. I read it again. It still felt true, but now it wasn't urgent. I realized something important. Growth doesn't always ask for witnesses. Sometimes it just asks for consistency. I didn't send the message, not because it didn't matter, but because the conversation had already happened, in real time, in real presence. Weeks passed, then months. I didn't become more emotional overnight. I didn't suddenly say everything I felt, but I stopped hiding behind neutrality, stopped pretending distance was maturity. I let people see uncertainty, let silence exist without filling it, let myself arrive even when it was uncomfortable. I don't know where she ended up. I don't know if she ever thought about me again. That's not the point. What matters is this. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to feel safe before I showed up. I showed up because I was ready. Some people come into your life to stay. Others come to reveal what you've been avoiding. She did the second. And this time, I didn't waste it. I didn't get her back, but I got myself back. And that finally felt like enough.